Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Work Trends with Meghan M. Biro. Whether you're here to network, learn, or share, we want you to have fun. During this live broadcast and Twitter chat, we'll discuss the future of work with smart and entertaining guests who value today's business and its impact on the world of work for the future. Stay tuned, because we start in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, everybody out there. Welcome to another informative talent culture work trends live podcast and Twitter chat. I am here in Cambridge. It's Wednesday, April 6th, and, it's winter here. What can we say? We thought spring was happening, but as some of you know who may be following me on Instagram and Facebook, not sure what to say to everybody. We've had snow, and it's like freezing cold. I just want to take a moment and say thank you to everybody who's reached out to me for my dad, who is in his very final stages this week of his fight with Alzheimer's. I love each and every one of you. Big hugs. Not going to get all emotional on you all right now. The show must go on, so I am here, and I want to give a very special thank you to all of our friends and our sponsors. So, this is an important topic. So I wanted to make sure that, we timed this well because, there's a lot of hot issues right now. There's new developments and emerging challenges that will likely catch employers by storm this year and next. We've got, Supreme Court decisions, federal and state laws. We've got fancy actions by federal regulatory agencies that have called into question the very nature of the employer-employee relationship, as well as what's right, what is right for employees, benefits. Everybody should be entitled to all of this stuff in the workplace, right? From providing paid sick leave to equal employment to extending equal rights and benefits to same-sex partners and accommodating pregnant women. An employer, looks to hopefully comply with some of these new obligations. Right? This is totally changing the way we work, the future of work, right? So today we want to discuss, what you need to know to avoid fines, penalties, complaints, litigation, all that stuff that kind of can cause an organization's reputation to be on the line, right? Huge headaches. So this conversation today is an important one. For, employers and brands and HR professionals and everybody in between, to be proactive and prepare to respond to these changes in a meaningful way. So it's my great pleasure today to introduce Beth Zoller, who is at Beth Zoller #1 on Twitter. She is a legal editor at Expert HR, where she covers such important topics as discrimination, employee privacy, and employee handbooks. Prior to this gig, Beth practiced law for over 10 years, representing employers all over the place, and we're going to learn much more about that. She received her JD from the Cardozo School of Law and holds a BS from Cornell University. So let's say hello to Beth.
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for having me on the program.
Oh, delighted to have you here. Obviously, really, really important topic, and I know you've got a whole lot of expertise on this particular theme. So, let's start by telling us just a little bit about you. Not the Beth, the legal editor, the former attorney who is practicing, doing amazing things, but Beth, right? Because, we bring ourselves to work every day, our whole self. So tell us just a little bit about yourself, Beth.
Yes, well, I went to Cornell University where I studied human development and family studies as well as American history and American studies. I love history, government, culture. I'm an avid reader. I enjoy films and documentary films. I love practicing and writing about labor and employment issues and how they affect the workplace. I think there's so many interesting angles to view it from, and so many of those angles and issues are brought up in this report. and this white paper that touches on issues we're discussing here today. And I love that it's so current, and it really relates to things that are being talked about in the news, things that are being talked about in the upcoming election. And you just turn on the news any night. I love going home and watching the 6:30 news with my family, and sharing with my kids what's going on in the world and how the world is changing and how these social, cultural, government issues are really coming to a head and creating, changes in the workplace and changes in the world.
Absolutely. And Beth, we talked about it a little bit in the green room, right? I mean, you're a mom.
Yes, I
are. You're clearly wearing a lot of important hats, right? And as a mother, it must just be astounding at the rate that these changes are taking place to watch your own kids also engage on social media, right?
Yes. I mean, one of the big issues that I do discuss is workplace wearables and the Internet of Things and cloud computing and the way technology has changed work. And you really see it in the future generations. They're just being brought up with social media completely integrated into their lives, with the way they do homework for school and the way they're going to work when they get to the workplace and millennials. It's really changing. And I think also with just respect to women's issues and mom issues that are really becoming people issues, such as, paid family leave, accommodations in the workplace for new mothers and pregnant women. These are issues that are affecting everyone everywhere that, employers really need to get behind and really need to understand and apply to their workplaces to keep pace.
Do you, on the home front, do you find that you need to curb time on devices at this point? I mean, what's it?
Yes.
I mean, how are you guys managing that as parents?
When our kids come home from school, we ask them to put their social media away because they can really get stuck on things like Instagram or Snapchat for a while, and I really want them to focus on their schoolwork. And I think, with all of the technology and all of the devices, you're really losing a lot of human connection and the way people interact, and that's something to keep in mind. Also, in this report that I've prepared, I've discussed telecommuting, and even if you have employees who are telecommuting, you still need to find ways to have your employees interact face-to-face and really these meaningful connections and social situations, which you really can't replicate over social media.
Absolutely, and it's important because it affects all of us, right? At every single generation, at every single level right now. So let's, I have a couple of questions. I kind of want to start with the basics.
Sure.
What are some simple ways for employers or employees, for that matter, to stay aware of workplace laws and obligations right now? Where do we start?
Well, one of the first things you can do is come to websites like ours, Expert HR, and read the news and, keep up with what's going on in the world of labor and employment issues and laws and how they're affecting the workplace. Be on top of what's going on with the government agencies that have been incredibly active, such as the National Labor Relations Board, Department of Labor, the EEOC. Things are happening every day, and these are really each case and each nugget and each press release from these agencies really has a lot of wisdom in it for employers. And, really just talk to your colleagues in council, make sure to keep up with your training and your policies and your employee handbooks, and just, don't fall behind because things are happening every day that employers really need to stay on top of.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a mad scramble right now, I think, for us to understand all of these issues because it's all happening. Been happening for a while, as we know, but now it's really, really happening at a faster pace, or so it feels that way, right?
That is true. I mean, there are changes, big changes just went into effect on April 1st in California that is overhauling discrimination and harassment practices in California, and it's now requiring employers to have a policy. That's a very big change, and the policy has to have specific things in it, and these are things that all employers have to know and be aware of. There's, just this past week, New York overhauled its pay and created a paid family leave. California just raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. These are issues that are happening that employers need to know and need to be aware of.
And whether or not you're in that state or not, what do you do when you're out of state? I mean, should we care if we're in Ohio?
Yeah, I mean, things are catching on by storm. Take one of the issues I discussed in the report, which is same-sex marriage. 10, 15 more years ago, a handful of states started passing laws or having court cases state that same-sex marriage was permissible and a right. And it really spread like wildfire until it reached the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court just last year said that there's a constitutional right to marry whoever you wish to. And it's an issue of equal protection and due process. And it really put to bed all of these different laws all over the United States. So, things are catching on like trends. A number of years ago, only a certain number of states protected pregnant women. Now you have from discrimination. Now you have much more states signing on to this. Paid sick leave is spreading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, things start to spread at first in the coastal cities and the urban areas, New York, California, but they are, invading the heartland and into the South, and these changes are really catching on. So it's important for employers to be on top of this, whether or not their state is, just as a trend that they need to be aware of.
Do me a favor, actually. Let's back up for a moment. Tell us just a little bit more about Expert HR, because I know you all started abroad, right?
Yes, Expert HR is
an organization. Tell us just a little bit more about it.
Sure. Expert HR is an online compliance tool for human resources professionals. We started in the early 2000s in the UK. We are a company related to Reed Business Information, which is under Reed Elsevier, now the Relics Group. We are a sister company of LexisNexis, and so when you come to our site, we have all citations to Lexis and provide access to Lexis documents, which are the primary source documents, statutes, case law.
Wow, that's actually, by the way, that's huge. They are a former client of mine back in the day when I was wearing a recruiting hat at the agency. Yeah. Very, very large. I mean, talk about data.
Yes.
Right?
And so what we have as an online compliance tool is covering all aspects of the employment relationship, from hiring to terminations. We have supervisor briefings. We have policies. We have an employee handbook tool that has been prepared jointly between Expert HR and Littler Mendelsohn. We have FAQs. We have how-to documents. We have quick reference charts for 50 states. We have news. We have really a whole range of documents and tools, and a really comprehensive toolbox to help employers with all aspects of managing their employees. We have tons of content on minimum wage, payment and compensation, healthcare, the Affordable Care Act. We cover all of these issues and really make managing your workplace a lot easier. So it's a great tool. We started here in the U.S. We launched in 2012, and we have had a lot of Fortune 500 companies sign on, and we really offer a lot. So I encourage everybody to check it out at www.experthr.com.
Will do. Thank you for that thorough overview. I think we could all use a little bit of, info. I certainly know I'll be heading over there a little later. My head is just spinning as we talk. I mean, how do you keep up with it all? And how do we train employees and managers on laws and new obligations? Right?
Well, training is very, very essential, whether it be harassment training, discrimination training, training on new ways to use technology in the workplace, training supervisors how to respond to requests for reasonable accommodations or religious accommodations in the workplace. Training can be very broad-based today. It can be by webinars, web-based training. I know my company, when they want to do training, does web-based training and encourages employees to take quizzes, and puts them in situations, which shows that they've complied with the training.
Can you do us a favor and walk us through what that looks like? That sounds really interesting.
For example, I just took a training on ethics. So there's a live presentation that is presented, and then it gives you role-playing situations, and then you have to answer the questions. So it's really, really interactive.
Right.
With that, it really it's not live per se, but it really is interactive and keeps employees engaged. So training is just an incredibly important tool. On our site, Expert HR, we have supervisor briefings that on over 50 topics that have been turned into PowerPoints ready to go for training purposes for employers, which is really helpful. So I encourage everybody to check that out as well, because I think PowerPoints can be really engaging and really kind of boil down what employees need to know.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think some of the common mistakes that employers are making right now in this arena? I mean, there's got to be a laundry list at this point, but is there, a top 3 or 5 in your mind?
In the arena of?
What kinds of mistakes in general are employers making when it comes to workplace laws and obligations right now?
Okay. Well, employers are making mistakes because they're not having firm policies and they're not following or applying those policies. They're not making employees aware of those policies or supervisors aware of those policies and how to handle situations. It's important to keep very accurate records and documentation. It's important to document your training. It's important to document your employment decisions and make sure that they're free of bias and based on legitimate, non-discriminatory reasons. It's important to just keep very adequate records and keep abreast of changes in the law and how they're affecting your workplace. Those are some common mistakes that employers are making.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel, do you feel, I should say, like the new legislation and other changes here in 2016 are hitting employers harder than in previous years? And if so, why? How are things changing with how dynamic it is now?
Well, in the area of the Department of Labor and overtime, I think a lot of employers should know and be worried if they're already not about the overtime changes that are coming that are going to raise the minimum salary level for exemption and make a lot more employees eligible for overtime. It's really important for employers to realize what's going on with respect to these overtime changes and make any changes to their workforce and classification of employees with respect to this. So that overtime issue is a tremendous issue that employers have to be on top of. We also have the whole piece from the National Labor Relations Board, which has been vigorously pursuing employers for infringing upon the right of employees to engage in protected concerted activity. Protected concerted activity is a right that comes from the National Labor Relations Act, which provides that employees have a right to come together and fight for improved wages, hours, and working conditions. And last year, the NLRB released a report saying that a lot of employer rules and policies are infringing upon this right. Such rules as confidentiality rules, rules about employee conduct, social media policies, rules about intellectual property, that all of these rules are infringing upon the employee right to engage in a protected concerted activity. So employers have to be very careful about their handbooks and the handbooks that they have out there that have outdated policies. Even if they're using new policies, if old policies are floating around, they could also get in trouble. Chipotle just found itself in hot water and was just reprimanded by the NLRB for having an old social media policy out there. They just came down recently with a decision, the NLRB, striking down an employer rule prohibiting recordings in the workplace because it was a right if the employees wanted to make recordings for union purposes and that this was protected concerted activity. So that's something to be very careful about. The EEOC has been flexing its muscles. It has been really vigorously pursuing its strategic enforcement plan and focusing on such things as barriers to recruiting and hiring, equal pay and equal rights for women, protecting immigrant populations and national origin discrimination. The EEOC has had a lot of changes coming. They're overhauling their retaliation guidance, which is really going to change the face of retaliation claims and make it much easier for employees to bring retaliation claims. They're releasing guidance on pregnant women and religious accommodations for Muslim employees and employees of Middle Eastern descent. They're cracking down on wellness programs as violating Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act. The EEOC has been so active. We do not yet have a federal law that makes sexual orientation and gender identity a protected class, but the EEOC is completely committed to making these protected classes and has filed lawsuits on behalf of transgender workers, on behalf of gay and lesbian workers, fighting for those rights. And that's being also reflected in the states. And that's something to be aware of. So the EEOC has been very, very active. And you also have the whole issue of paid sick leave and family leave, and rights for working parents, which is very which is happening right now. We have changes in New York. New York just passed paid family leave. Vermont just passed paid sick leave, and every day when you read the news, something else is happening. We are an increasingly diverse society, and employers need to understand that and work to increase that in their workplace and make sure that they're accommodating the needs of a diverse workplace.
And you sleep when with all these changes happening and then needing to actually report on them?
I don't sleep a lot, but I have a lot of energy, so that works out.
So let's break this down a little bit, because you literally just read a laundry list of thingies, right?
Sure.
That happen in something we call the workplace. Tell us about what the hot topics are, maybe in courts or elsewhere, that you recommend right now out of that list that employers keep their eye on? Because obviously we're doing this in baby steps right now.
Sure.
So break it down for us a little bit.
I'm going to break it down kind of in buckets. I think employers need to be aware of Department of Labor issues, overtime changes, and misclassification of independent contractors. Make sure that you're paying employees correctly and be on top of those changes. Also, be aware of changes with respect to joint employment liability. There's a big push by the government agencies to find a lot more employers that they are employers and find them jointly liable to employees. So that's one of the buckets. We also have the bucket of paid sick leave, which is huge and just happening, and family leave, that employers really need to stay on top of the requirements in their states and cities, and if they apply to them. And even if your state does not or city does not mandate paid sick leave, you might want to give those days or paid time off to employees as a perk. There is the issue of, expanding protected classes in the workplace and reasonable accommodations. This week, last week, Utah passed a law providing accommodations to pregnant women and to breastfeeding women and women affected by medical issues related to those. So that's very important to be accommodating and make sure that your workplace policies, keep up with that. Then there's the technology issue, and to be aware of how technology and telecommuting and protecting the employer's confidential information, there's that piece. So, there's a handful of buckets that employers should be aware of, and you really keep up with those changes, because what worked, last year or 2 years ago is not really going to work now. And an employer might find itself in hot water. Right.
What about last month, Beth?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
give
me this audience here, the Work Trends community, is a very social media savvy group of people. Shout outs to all of my friends out there who, they participate in Twitter chats, they blog. We're on, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, hopefully for me soon. Everyone's getting a chuckle out of that one. But tell us a little bit about, I'm surprised you're not bringing up social media more in this conversation so far. Let's go back to some case studies that you've learned about in your, exploration of social media gone wrong. What happened with Chipotle? Tell us a little bit about where social is fitting into this big bucket of issues that we're seeing.
Social media is huge, and you have, everybody is on social media these days and has a profile and is saying what they want to say on social media, and it really has become, the water cooler of today. So you have employees like the employee at Chipotle who went on social media and complained about having to about having to work on snow days when other workers were off, and he tweeted and was engaging with his colleagues, and then he was disciplined for it, and the NLRB said that this is protected concerted activity and that these are not individual concerns, they're group concerns, and they're collective actions aimed at improving wages, hours, and working conditions. And so the NLRB reprimanded Chipotle for disciplining that worker, and it also said that it's policy. You really can't say things in your policy. I mean, when employers started creating social media policies, they would say you cannot divulge the employer's confidential information, you cannot disparage the employer, and those broad-based statements without narrowing it down and being specific and guaranteeing employees the right to engage in protected concerted activity, they don't work, because employees are allowed to share confidential information about their salaries with other workers and ask other workers about their salaries, and that's a right under the National Labor Relations Act. Employees are allowed to complain about their companies. And so these statements that were in the social media policy, they don't work. They're problematic. And the NLRB is going to, come down hard on them. We also have a number of other issues. There's a big trend in the states to pass social media privacy protection laws and to prohibit employers from asking employees or applicants for their social media passwords. And
we knew this, hey Beth, we knew this one was coming, right?
Yeah, I mean there's been some introduction of federal legislation, but employers really want to try to learn a lot about their employees by viewing social media, and they have to be very careful how they do it. Yes, there are a number of exceptions in these laws for investigations, for information in the public domain, but you really have to be careful, because an employer might learn something on social media. An employer might learn the employee's sexual.
Wait, I love might. What about me? What about definitely?
They're gonna learn their sexual orientation, their religion, their where they're taking a trip with their family, and all of these things. The employer might use that as a basis for a discriminatory employment decision. And so these laws are being passed all over the United States. We think we have somewhere in the region of 20 or more at this point. So that's something. Another issue that's very important with social media is if you tweet and you've developed a Twitter or LinkedIn following, is that your following or is it your employer's? Well, that really is going to depend on a number of factors. It's going to depend on whether the employer encouraged the employee to create the account, and what kind of control, who really controlled the account. What can you do as an individual, and what are you doing as an individual wearing your hat of employment? So those are all very important issues when it comes to social media.
Beth, we are running down on the half hour right now, so I think we should just take this conversation over to Twitter and continue to kind of talk about the top 10 scariest employment challenges of 2016. We've got plenty here to talk about. So thank you so much for being today's guest, and you are a just wealth of knowledge. And, thank you to everybody out there for joining us. And, let's continue this. This is a really, really interesting and important discussion.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you over on Twitter.